Chapter 1. Twilight Descends. The year is 1348, and dusk settles over a small medieval town like a soft shroud. The sun melts into the horizon, casting a ruddy glow over timber-framed houses and empty dirt roads. Once, at this hour, the streets would be alive with villagers returning from the fields, the air filled with laughter and the haggling of merchants. But tonight is eerily quiet. Doors are bolted shut, windows shuttered tightly from within. In the gathering twilight, silence rules, broken only by the distant call of crows and the whisper of a chill autumn wind. It is as if the very town is holding its breath, afraid to stir. Thomas sits on the stoop of his humble cottage, gazing at the fading light with weary eyes. He is a sturdy man in his middle years, shoulders once strong from farm work now slumped with exhaustion. In his calloused hands, he turns over a worn wooden rosary, the beads smooth from years of prayers. He whispers a quiet prayer under his breath, not with the confident faith he once had, but with desperation. As the last orange rays of sunlight flicker and die, Thomas feels the weight of the coming night heavy in his chest. Nighttime has become the most feared part of the day, when darkness magnifies every worry and the ill draw their final breaths. He remembers a time, not long ago, when twilight would bring the sound of church bells signalling the evening Angelus. The bells would call villagers to prayer, their bronze voices warm and reassuring across the valley. Now the church bell tolls only to mark yet another death, ringing sporadically at all hours until even the bell ringer fell ill. Thomas listens, but tonight there is no bell at all. So many have perished in recent weeks that the bell ringer has grown too exhausted, or perhaps there is simply no one left to ring the bell. The stillness is absolute, an unsettling calm after months of panic and sorrow. A distant scream of a night bird slices through the quiet, and Thomas flinches. In normal times, he might have thought it an owl or a fox, but now every unexpected sound sets his heart on edge. He forces himself to breathe slowly. The air is cool and carries the smell of smoke and rot, the scent of the plague. It's a strange bitter odor that has become all too familiar, a mix of wood smoke from bonfires lit to purify the air, and the unmistakable sweet sickly stench of sickness that wafts from shuttered homes. He closes his eyes for a moment, and the memory of just a few months ago floods in, the harvest market day, cheerful and bright. Neighbours chatting in the lanes, children chasing each other by this very stoop where he now sits alone. It feels like a dream, another lifetime before the pestilence arrived. As darkness deepens, shadows stretch like black fingers across the ground. Thomas rises to his feet, joints aching from the damp. He knows he cannot linger outside much longer. The nights carry a biting chill now, and he doesn't want to catch any ordinary illness on top of everything. Slowly, he pushes open his cottage door. It creaks softly, the familiar sound oddly comforting in a world that has become so alien. Before stepping in, he casts one more glance at the sky. A few stars begin to prick through the indigo veil overhead, cold and distant. He wonders how many more people will live to see those same stars before the night is over. With a heavy sigh, Thomas enters his home, bracing himself for what the long night will bring. Inside, the one-room cottage is dim, lit only by the faint glow of embers in the hearth. The familiar scent of peat smoke mingles with the pungent aroma of herbs hung from the rafters. He's taken to hanging bundles of dried lavender and rosemary in the house. The herbal fragrance is meant to ward off the bad air that many believe carries the plague. By day, the herb's scent is barely noticeable, but at night in the stillness it's stronger, a bittersweet perfume that clings to his clothes and skin. Thomas moves quietly, careful not to disturb the small figure lying on a pallet of straw near the hearth. On the straw mattress, his young daughter Anna sleeps fitfully, or rather, she drifts in a half-conscious fever dream. Anna is only 8 years old, her usually rosy cheeks now pale and sunken. By the faint firelight, Thomas can see the sheen of sweat on her forehead, and the way her little chest rises and falls in rapid breaths. He kneels beside her, one work-worn hand gently brushing damp strands of hair from her face. Her skin is burning hot to the touch. Thomas's heart clenches. He has done everything he can think of to bring her fever down, cooling her face with cloths soaked in precious well water, spooning weak broth between her dry lips, murmuring every prayer of healing he knows. But the fever rages on. Outside, the last light has died, and night has fully descended. Through a gap in the shutter, a sliver of moonlight filters in, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. Thomas sits on a low stool beside Anna, listening to her shallow breathing. He will not leave her side if he can help it. This is the promise he made when his wife, Margaret, fell ill 2 weeks ago, that he would protect their child as long as he had breath in his body. Margaret. Thomas squeezes his eyes shut and bows his head. The memory of his wife's face as she slipped away is still raw and vivid. She had been so full of life and laughter. Even as sickness took hold, she tried to smile for him and Anna. On her final night, she clutched Thomas's hand with surprising strength and whispered for him to remain strong for their daughter. Margaret died at dawn, just as the first rays of sun touched the thatch of their roof. It was only a fortnight past, but to Thomas it feels like ages. The days since have been an endless blur of grief, duty, and fear. He opens his eyes and gazes at Anna's face, noting how much she resembles her mother. The same brown hair, now damp with sweat, the same delicate eyelids. Anna stirs and lets out a faint whimper, half word, half sigh. Thomas leans closer, whispering softly, "Hush now, little one. I'm here." His voice is low and steady, the kind one would use to calm a spooked horse, though inside he is anything but calm. His stomach twists with helpless worry. He places a cool cloth on Anna's brow again. She doesn't wake, but her lips part as if trying to say something. Perhaps she is calling out to her mother in her fevered dreams. Thomas rocks back slightly, the stool creaking beneath him. He continues murmuring gentle words, not sure if she can hear. "It's all right, Anna. Just sleep. Dream of the apple blossoms in spring. Remember how you danced under the trees?" His voice catches as he recalls the memory himself. Only last spring, Anna twirling under the orchard trees, petals swirling around her like snow, while Margaret laughed. It was a joyful day, untouched by any shadow. Now those same orchards stand untended, and petals have long since given way to falling leaves and decay. The wind picks up outside, rattling the shutters. A draught sneaks through the cracks in the door, making the flame of a tallow candle on the table flicker. Shadows shift on the walls, looming large, then receding, like phantoms playing at the edge of sight. Thomas clears his throat quietly and adds a couple of bits of wood to the hearth, coaxing the embers. A small flame licks up, casting a warm orange glow over the rough-hewn interior of the cottage. In this light, the hanging herbs cast spidery silhouettes across the ceiling. For a moment, Thomas imagines they look like dangling corpses and shudders, quickly turning his gaze back to the fire. He must keep his imagination in check. These are dangerous times to let fear run wild. He leans forward, elbows on his knees, and rubs his hands over his face. His skin is gritty with fatigue and the dirt of the day. Today, like most days recently, had been filled with grim tasks. He spent the afternoon digging a grave in the little plot behind the church, a fresh grave for a neighbour who had died the night before. There were no proper funerals anymore, no priests available for last rites for each individual soul. Instead, a handful of villagers, who were still relatively healthy, took on the duty of burying the dead as best they could, in hurried prayers and shallow graves. Thomas helped because he felt it was the right thing to do, and because perhaps someone would do the same when his time came. Death has become so commonplace that each burial is perfunctory, done with numb resignation rather than ceremony. "There are not enough living to bury the dead," he recalls. One of the friars saying grimly, before the friar too succumbed to the plague. The words echo in Thomas's mind as he stares at the fire. Not enough living. He wonders how close their town is to that threshold. The cottage is quiet, aside from the crackle of the small fire and Anna's breathing. Thomas forces himself to eat a little piece of rye bread, his supper. He chews slowly, though it tastes like dust in his mouth. It's important to keep up his strength, he knows. The bread is stale and hard, but he softens it in some watered ale. Supplies have dwindled. The baker stopped coming to market weeks ago. Thomas had bartered some eggs for this loaf a few days back, but there's little left now. Perhaps tomorrow he'll venture to the edge of town, where a farmer sometimes leaves out produce for trade, if tomorrow comes as normal. Every night, he wonders if he and Anna will see the morning sun. Outside, the sky deepens to black, and a sliver of waning moon casts a ghostly light when the clouds permit. Thomas finishes the meagre meal and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. He checks the water bucket. It's less than a quarter full. That won't do. Anna will need water through the night if her fever continues. With a reluctant sigh, Thomas decides he must fetch more water from the village well. It's only at the crossroads not far from his door, a short walk. But going out at night fills him with dread. Normally, one might fear bandits or wild animals, but now it's an invisible terror that makes him hesitate to step outside. The pestilence that hangs in the air, and the possibility of encountering another desperate soul in the darkness. Yet, he cannot let his daughter go thirsty. Thomas stands and gently tucks the wool blanket more snugly around Anna. She barely stirs. He whispers, "I'll be right back," although she likely cannot hear. Taking up a small clay cup, he measures a bit of the precious water and dribbles a few drops between Anna's parched lips. She swallows reflexively. Satisfied that she's at least gotten that, Thomas rises and grabs an empty bucket by the door. He also takes a rag and wraps it around his nose and mouth, a crude mask against the night air which he fears might carry the sickness. Many in town have taken to doing this, and some even carry posies of flowers or crushed herbs to breathe through, convinced it wards off the miasma. Thomas plucks a sprig of rosemary from the rafters and tucks it into the cloth near his nostrils. The scent is sharp and piney, helping to mask the foulness outside. Bracing himself, he unlatches the door and slips out into the night. The darkness greets him like an old enemy. Immediately, the cool air wraps around him, carrying with it that mix of wood smoke and decay that no amount of rosemary can completely cover. Thomas's eyes take a moment to adjust. The moon provides just enough light to see the outlines of buildings and the glistening cobblestones ahead. The town appears deserted, as if long abandoned, though he knows dozens of families are huddled behind those dark windows, just like he was moments ago. He moves quietly, boots scraping on the dirt. Instinctively, he keeps to the center of the lane, avoiding the shadows near walls and eaves. Not out of fear of robbers, there's nothing left to steal in a plague-stricken town, but out of some animal caution against the unknown. The well is only a short distance. As he walks, Thomas glances at the houses he passes. In better times, he could name who lived in each one. The cooper with his 6 lively sons, all so proud last year when one became an apprentice in the city. The old widow Mary, who loved to gossip by her front step. The baker's family, always up before dawn, with warm bread scenting the air. Now, many of these homes are dark and silent. Some have crude marks on their doors. Thomas notices a black smear on one, a hastily painted cross or X in ash, perhaps placed by the family inside, as a plea for prayers or a warning to stay away. One door hangs open entirely, swaying gently in the breeze. Thomas averts his eyes as he passes that one. He doesn't want to think about what lies behind that open door. A rat scurries across the street, darting from one pile of refuse to another. Thomas starts, nearly dropping his bucket at the sudden movement. He exhales, chiding himself for jumping at a rat. But rats have become a ubiquitous sight of late. They thrive in the waste and abandonment, growing bold as humans retreat. By the flicker of moonlight, he can even see fleas hopping on the rat's mangy fur as it pauses in a puddle. Thomas doesn't know the role of those fleas in this nightmare. No one does yet, but he feels a surge of disgust and nudges a stone toward the creature. It squeaks and vanishes down an alley. Vermin are the least of his worries, yet the image lingers. The town overrun by rats feasting on what remains of a dying world. He continues on, bucket in hand. The well comes into view, a dark shape against the slightly lighter sky. As Thomas nears it, his steps slow. A shape is slumped next to the well. His heart lurches. In the pale moonlight, he sees it's a person, or was. A man lies crumpled on the ground, one arm outstretched toward the well's stone rim. The posture of the body suggests he died in the act of desperate need, perhaps trying to draw water. Thomas hesitates a few yards away, his breath catching in his throat. He recognizes the tattered green tunic even in low light. It's Jacob, the tailor's son, a boy of barely 17. Only yesterday, Thomas heard Jacob had fallen ill and that his family was nursing him. He must have wandered out, delirious with thirst or fever, and collapsed here. Thomas fights down a wave of sorrow and nausea. In normal times, he would rush to help, check for life, call for others. But now, he knows Jacob is beyond any help. He can tell by the unnatural stillness of the boy's form, the way the skinny limbs lie limp. Keeping his distance, Thomas murmurs a shaky prayer. God rest your soul, Jacob. He considers what to do. Leaving the body here feels wrong, but he cannot manage moving it alone, not when he must hurry back to Anna. Perhaps in the morning he can arrange for Jacob to be collected and buried, or maybe Jacob's own father will come searching. Thomas swallows hard. The tailor's family has already lost 2 children last week, now likely this one too. How much can one family bear, he thinks grimly, but every family has similar stories now. He approaches the well on the opposite side of Jacob's body to keep a few paces away. The bucket in his hand trembles as he hooks it to the rope. The pulley creaks softly as he lowers it into the darkness. There is a splash as it hits water below. Thomas cranks it back up, hand over hand, the rope rough against his palm. Soon the bucket emerges heavy with water. As he lifts it, a memory surfaces. Fetching water on summer evenings with his wife by his side. How Margaret would remark on the golden light in the treetops, or scold him for splashing water on his boots. Such small, sweet moments that he took for granted now haunt him with their absence. Thomas pours the fresh water into his carry bucket. In the silence, he can hear the faint trickle and drip as it transfers. He looks again at Jacob's body. The boy is on his side, face turned away. Thomas's eyes catch something dark staining the back of Jacob's neck. Perhaps the telltale egg-sized swelling of a bubo, or dried blood. He quickly averts his gaze. It's too heartbreaking, and he must keep his resolve. Straightening up, Thomas lifts his bucket of water. He winces at the weight. He is bone-tired, and even this everyday task feels onerous now. As he turns to head home, something makes him pause. A sound in the distance, faint at first, then unmistakable. The wheels of a cart rolling over cobbles, and a voice calling out in the night. Thomas feels his blood run cold. He knows that call. It's one he's heard on and off at nights like this. Bring out your dead. The words echo faintly through the still air, drawn out and haunting. It's the death cart making its rounds, a handful of unfortunate men charged with collecting the bodies that people leave outside, to carry them to the mass graves. Thomas instinctively steps back into the shadows by the well, not wanting to be seen. He holds his breath as the cart approaches the crossroads. Soon, an outline emerges from the darkness, a rickety 2-wheeled cart drawn by an old donkey. A lantern swinging from the cart's front casts wobbly light on the figure walking beside it. Thomas sees the cart driver, a lanky man with a shawl wrapped around his face and a hood pulled low. In one hand he carries a small bell, which he tolls with a dull clank. In a weary, monotone voice he calls again, "Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!" The cart rolls into the square by the well, and Thomas can now see, by the lantern's sickly glow, the grim cargo it carries. A pile of bodies, loosely shrouded in cloth, perhaps a half-dozen or more, lies in the cart's bed. Some limbs protrude stiffly. An old woman's lifeless arm hangs over the side, swaying with each jolt of the wheel. Thomas feels bile rise in his throat and forces himself to look away, focusing instead on the glistening water in his bucket. This is reality now, he reminds himself, no matter how horrific. The cart driver has noticed Jacob's corpse by the well. With a practiced air of resignation, the man brings the donkey to a halt and sets his lantern down. He then moves toward the still form. Thomas watches silently from a few yards away, in the shadows, not wanting to interfere or draw attention to himself. He sees the driver lean down, checking briefly for any sign of life, perhaps out of habit or hope, but there is none. With a grunt, the driver lifts Jacob's body under the arms and drags it toward the cart. Jacob was a slight youth, but dead weight is heavy, and the driver struggles for a moment to heave the body up. Thomas, compelled by decency, steps forward. "Here, let me help," he offers quietly, voice muffled by his cloth mask. The driver turns, momentarily startled to see a living soul out at this hour. His eyes above his shawl widen, then soften in gratitude. Without words, Thomas sets down his water and moves to take Jacob's legs. Together, they lift the boy and carefully place him onto the cart among the other wrapped forms. Thomas tries not to look too closely, but he cannot avoid seeing the faces of death, a young girl's pale, doll-like face peeking from a blanket, an older man's jaw slack in final repose. They arrange Jacob respectfully as possible. Thomas notices the driver whispering a fragment of a prayer under his breath as he covers the boy's face with a scrap of cloth. "Thank you," the driver croaks out. It's probably the first kindness he's received in some time. Thomas nods, not trusting his voice to speak. In the dim lantern light, he can see the driver's eyes are red-rimmed, whether from exhaustion, tears, or the acrid smoke of burning pyres. One can't tell. Perhaps all three. The man clears his throat. "Are there any others nearby?" he asks, his tone flat, but with an undertone of dread, as if he expects at every stop to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of dead. Thomas quickly shakes his head. "Not here, not tonight," he replies softly. He thinks of Anna inside his cottage and prays fiercely she will not be next. The driver holds his gaze for a moment, and Thomas senses the man's silent understanding. They both share the same fear. Every person does now. The driver climbs back to his cart, joints cracking. He takes up the lantern and raises it a bit, scanning the surrounding darkness. The light glints off the stone well and a nearby wall. For the first time, Thomas notices something scrawled on the wall in what looks like white chalk or lime. It reads, "Lord, have mercy upon us." Those words must have been written when the plague first struck, a plea left by someone for divine intervention. Now the chalk is smeared and faded, half washed away by rains. It seems even the prayers are dying. Thomas sighs and returns to pick up his bucket of water. The cart driver gently snaps the reins, and the donkey lurches forward with a tired bray. The wheels creak as the cart gets under way again. As the man departs, he resumes his low call, dutifully, "Bring out your dead." The sound grows fainter as he heads further down the lane, stopping at another cluster of houses. Thomas stands there for a few moments, the water bucket in hand, feeling utterly hollow. The encounter has left him shaken, but strangely also grateful. Grateful that tonight he was placing someone else's loved one onto that cart, and not his own child. He swallows, whispering another prayer for Jacob and the others, then steels himself to walk back home. On the way, Thomas passes the open door he noticed earlier. The death cart will likely stop there soon. From within that dark entryway, he hears a faint noise. It sounds like moaning, or could it be a low chant? A shiver runs through him. Curiosity wars with caution. After a brief hesitation, he peers through the open doorway, careful to keep his distance. Inside, by the scant light of the moon, he can just make out a small front room. There are shapes of toppled furniture, perhaps a struggle or someone collapsing. In the gloom, he discerns a figure kneeling over what might be a bed. It's a man. Thomas recognizes the hunched outline as old Father Augustine, the town's elderly priest. The priest is murmuring something, his hands moving in the sign of the cross over a still form lying on the bed. Thomas's heart tightens. He can guess what happened. Father Augustine must be giving last rites to whoever died in that house. The priest has been indefatigable, tending to the sick and dying even when every other clergyman fled or fell ill themselves. He's well past 60 and frail, Yet somehow he soldiers on, determined to offer comfort until his own candle burns out. Thomas decides not to disturb this holy moment. He steps back and silently continues on his way. He knows the priest's presence means one more soul has just departed this world. Death is everywhere tonight, as it has been every night lately, moving through the town like an invisible fog, seeping under doors and through cracks. By the time Thomas reaches his cottage again, his hands are trembling from more than just the weight of the water. He nudges the door open and slips inside, fastening it securely behind him. The interior seems even darker after being under the moonlight. He sets the bucket down and takes a moment to catch his breath. The small fire has dwindled, so he feeds it a few twigs and one of the precious logs he has left. Flames kindle once more, pushing back the darkness with a comforting glow. Thomas then goes to Anna's side immediately. She's still asleep, but her breaths come in quick, shallow pants. Her brow is furrowed as if she's having a nightmare. Gently, he lifts her a bit to a sitting position and supports her. She's limp and groans quietly as he moves her. "Shh, it's all right, love," he whispers. With his free hand, he scoops some water from the bucket into a cup. He wets her lips again, and this time she weakly turns her head, trying to drink. "That's it, just a little," Thomas coaxes softly. Anna's eyes flutter open for just a second, glassy, unfocused. He isn't even sure she truly sees him, but she does swallow a sip or two. Then she closes her eyes and seems to drift off again. Thomas eases her back down and feels her forehead, still so hot, like fire beneath the skin. The swellings on her neck and under her arm are still there. He doesn't need to check to know. The memory of their touch when he examined her in daylight is branded in his mind. 2 hard lumps, each the size of an egg, painfully tender, and skin mottled around them. Classic signs of the plague. Signs he prayed he'd never see on his child, but here they are. He had tried to lance one of the swellings earlier in the day with a heated knife, having heard from a neighbor that sometimes releasing the poisoned blood could save a person. It was a crude, desperate attempt. Anna had been semi-conscious and whimpered when he made the cut, a dark, foul pus oozing out. Whether it helped or only added to her suffering, he cannot know. He cleaned and bandaged it as best he could, with clean rags soaked in vinegar, a remedy he had overheard, claiming vinegar's sharpness could kill the pestilence. Nothing to do now but hope. Thomas settles onto the stool once more. The events of the night so far weigh on him, the image of young Jacob's body on the death cart, the priest muttering over a corpse in the open-doored house, the call, "Bring out your dead," still echoing in his ears. This truly feels like a night in medieval hell, a hell not of fire and demons, but of emptiness, sorrow, and relentless death. He feels as though he is living through a nightmare from which he cannot wake. In this hell, the streets are silent, and the houses full of dying families. Prayers seem to go unanswered, and hope is as fleeting as a wisp of smoke. Yet Thomas is not fully defeated, not yet. He clenches his jaw and reaches for the small wooden cross that hangs on the wall above the hearth. It belonged to his wife. Margaret had kept it there, believing it protected their home. Thomas presses it in both hands and murmurs a prayer, halting but sincere. "Lord, you spared us in times of famine. You protected us in times of war. Please, see us through this plague. Spare my child if it be your will. Give me strength to endure this night." His voice cracks, and a tear finally escapes, tracing down the grime on his face. He doesn't wipe it away. Perhaps a tear or two is warranted. No one is here to judge. Outside, a gust of wind howls, and then subsides into a low moan around the eaves. The weather is changing. Thomas can smell incoming rain on the wind, a dampness amid the smoke. Rain might be a blessing. Some say heavy rain can cleanse the air of the plague miasmas. Others fear it drives the bad air into the ground and wells. One can hardly know what to believe anymore. In these times, superstition and rumour spread as fast as the disease itself. Thomas recalls the rumours that circulated when the sickness first came. There were whispers that it started in far-off lands, that it travelled in the silk and spice caravans from the east. He remembers the day he first heard about a terrible pestilence abroad. It was early spring, and a tinker passing through spoke of a great mortality in the south, across the sea, where whole cities were said to be wiped out. People in the tavern had crossed themselves and dismissed it as exaggeration or a distant concern. But Thomas's wife had given him a worried look that night and said, "Pray. It does not come here." They prayed indeed, but by summer the rumours grew, cases in the port cities, then spreading inland along trade routes. Thomas had begun noticing changes even before the sickness reached them. Traders stopped arriving, or when they did, they brought frightening news. One told of how in Florence bodies piled up in the streets because there weren't enough living to bury them. Another mentioned that in France entire villages were found empty, as if ghosts had taken everyone. At these stories, some folk laughed nervously, calling them travellers' tales. Others believed them absolutely and started to prepare. They stored food, avoided strangers, and some even fled to the countryside while they could. Father Augustine gave a sermon warning that this pestilence might be God's punishment for the sins of mankind, and he urged everyone to repent and live righteously. That had filled the church with wailing and prayers for a short time, until the plague truly arrived and the church's doors were forced shut by the sheer number of dead within. The first case in Thomas's own town came in late summer. A merchant's wife, recently back from visiting relatives in the city, fell ill with a mysterious fever. Within days, her household was stricken. Servants, children, all burning with the same fever and sprouting the painful lumps. The physicians, if they could be called that, who examined them, were baffled and terrified. People realized with dread that the great mortality was here among them. From that point, it was as if a dark tide washed over the town. Every day, more fell sick. Every morning, one would wake to the tolling bell announcing another death, then another, until the bell ran out of ringers. Thomas remembers how swiftly normal life unravelled. Fear took hold so strongly. Neighbours avoided each other. The market emptied. Shops closed as their keepers either fled or died. The healthy refused to care for the sick in many cases, even friends and kin. Mothers and fathers, terrified by the contagion, sometimes abandoned their own ill children, or children their parents. Compassion dried up under the burning sun of self-preservation. Thomas saw it with his own eyes. One of his neighbours, a stout man named Roland, boarded up his own brother in a house when the brother showed symptoms, leaving food at the doorstep but refusing to enter. The brother died alone, and Roland did not even attend the burial. It was unthinkable behaviour in normal times, yet it was becoming common. Death without sorrow, marriage without affection, a line from some chronicle he once heard, surfaces in his memory. Yes, it's like all the usual human bonds are unravelling. Thomas, however, couldn't abandon his loved ones, even if he had thought to. When Margaret got sick, he tended her day and night, unflinching, despite others warning him to keep away. And now with Anna, he will do the same. If the cost is his own life, so be it. He cannot imagine doing otherwise. He wonders if that makes him brave or foolish, but either way, love leaves him no choice. He adds another piece of wood to the fire, mindful to keep it small. Fuel is precious. Many woodcutters have died or stopped coming to sell logs, so every stick counts. The flame casts a steadier light now. Anna's face is illuminated, and Thomas notices it's flushed deeply, a near crimson against the pallor around her eyes. She suddenly coughs, a thin, dry cough that racks her small body and then fades. Thomas leans forward, holding her hand, waiting to see if she wakes. She doesn't. The cough subsides into a whimper. He strokes her hand until she grows still again. Time flows strangely in the dark hours. Thomas loses track of how long he sits there, alternating between quiet prayers, memories, and listening to Anna's breathing. At intervals, he dozes for a few minutes at a time, head nodding forward before he jerks awake, heart pounding with fear that he might have missed something. Each time, Anna is still there, chest rising and falling, though at moments her breathing seems so shallow he has to lean close to feel it on his cheek. Outside, the wind has settled, and with it comes a heavy stillness. It might be past midnight now, he isn't sure. The town is utterly silent. No more cart, no cries, not even dogs barking. Many of the dogs, he recalls, either ran off to the woods or were killed early on due to some superstition that they spread the disease. Cats, too, were driven away or slain by frightened folk. This ironically allowed the rat population to explode, some said. If only they knew how those rodents carried death on their backs. But such knowledge is beyond them. Instead, people blamed what they could: bad air, corrupted water, an angry god, even poisonous vapors from earthquakes, as one bizarre rumor claimed. And tragically, some turned on their fellow humans. There were stories of pogroms against helpless communities, scapegoating them for poisoning wells. Thomas can scarcely fathom that level of misguided horror, but he knows human panic can be a cruel, blind beast. He sighs deeply and adjusts his own position, joints stiff from sitting so long. The fire is now just coals again, so he feeds it a last handful of twigs. A soft glow pulsates from the hearth, painting the walls in gentle red. The monotony of waiting and watching starts to play tricks on his mind. In the silence, every creak of the house, every sigh of wind, becomes amplified and uncanny. Thomas finds himself listening intently for sounds within Anna. Is her breathing changing? Was that a hitch in her throat? He feels her forehead once more and thinks, maybe, just maybe, it's a fraction cooler than before. Or is that wishful thinking? He can't be sure. Fever often spikes at night. Maybe it will break toward morning. He latches onto that hope, however slim. To keep himself awake, Thomas quietly begins to speak. He tells Anna a story, an old bedtime tale he used to recite when she was younger and afraid of imaginary monsters in the dark. His voice is low and steady, and though she likely cannot hear him in her fevered sleep, the act of storytelling comforts him too. He tells of a brave little girl who travels through a dark forest to find a magic herb that can heal her village. It was one of Anna's favourites, a tale Margaret had invented. As he narrates softly, Thomas's eyes wander to the hanging herbs in their cottage, and a rueful smile tugs at his lips. If only curing this plague were as simple as finding a single magic herb. Many healers and learned doctors have tried a multitude of remedies, poultices of lileli root and tree resins, potions of ground emerald, for those rich enough, bleeding the patients with leashes or incisions, fumigating houses with aromatic smoke. None have proven truly effective, as far as Thomas can tell. Father Augustine even organized a procession early on, a solemn march of townsfolk behind the Holy Cross, praying for divine mercy. Thomas attended with his family, clutching Anna's hand, while Margaret sang hymns through tears. They walked the entire town perimeter, beseeching God to spare them. And yet, here they are. He continues the bedtime story, describing how the little girl in the tale braves wolves and spirits, how the forest is scary, but she holds on to love and courage, and in the deepest dark of night she finds a glowing flower that holds the cure. His voice almost drifts into a chant, repeating some soothing phrases about courage and light in the darkness. He repeats a key line for emphasis, as Margaret always did. Even in the darkest night, the smallest light of hope can guide you home. He says this twice, slowly, as if willing it to be true. Perhaps on some level he is speaking to himself as much as to Anna. As the hours drag on, Thomas's mind starts to wander in a haze. He imagines he hears distant chanting carried on the breeze, perhaps a memory of the flagellant monks who passed through town some weeks before. That was a surreal sight, about 30 hooded men, stripped to the waist despite the chill, marching in a line through the main street. By torchlight, they came at dusk, chanting a plaintive Latin hymn. At every few steps, they would stop and whip themselves across the back with knotted cords until blood splattered on the cobbles. They were pilgrims of penance, believing that only by punishing their flesh could they earn God's forgiveness for humanity and end the plague. Thomas had watched them with a mix of pity and horror as they disappeared over the hill. the sound of their self-flagellation fading into the night. Some townsfolk joined that caravan out of desperation, but most stayed behind. Now, in the silence of his cottage, he can almost hear their voices in his mind, the low, rhythmic song, the crack of whips, the collective moan of pain and pleading. It is a memory that feels like a fever dream, yet it happened. He looks down at his arms and imagines how those zealots must have felt with each lash on their skin, trying to externalize the pain that all carried inside. Thomas doesn't believe such extreme measures did any good. The plague persisted regardless of the flagellants' bloody sacrifices, and rumor had it that many flagellants themselves succumbed eventually. Still, at least they tried something, he muses. Everyone is trying in their own way to survive this hellish trial, whether through science, superstition, or piety. A sudden tapping at the window shutter startles him. Thomas's heart leaps, and he almost knocks over the water bucket in surprise. It sounded like a single rap, perhaps a loose shutter clasp, or could it be a person? He holds his breath, straining to hear. After a moment, it comes again. Tap, tap. Definitely something at the window. Setting his jaw, Thomas rises cautiously. He grabs the small dagger he keeps by the hearth, more a tool than a weapon, but it gives a sense of protection. He approaches the window. "Who's there?" he calls quietly, not wanting to wake Anna or draw undue attention. At first, no answer. Then a quavering voice whispers, "Please, help." It's a female voice, trembling with fear. Thomas's tense shoulders relax slightly, and he unbars the shutter to peer out. In the darkness, he can just make out a figure huddled beneath the window, a woman clutching a bundle. She looks up at him with eyes wide in the gloom. It's Agnes, a neighbor from 3 houses down. Thomas recognizes her by her voice and her distinctive braided bonnet. She's a young mother he's known in passing. They sometimes exchanged greetings on the way to market. "Agnes," he whispers, incredulous to find her out here in the middle of the night. "What are you doing? It's dangerous to be out." She stands, and he sees tracks of tears on her cheeks glisten in the faint light. In her arms, she holds a small child, her infant son, no more than a year old. The baby is eerily quiet, wrapped tightly in a blanket. Agnes's voice breaks as she speaks. I didn't know where else to go. My husband." She chokes on her words. Thomas notices now that Agnes isn't wearing a mask or shawl. Her face is uncovered and flushed with distress. Instinctively, he pulls up the rag over his own nose more securely, then feels guilty at the reflex. "What about your husband?" he asks gently, though he fears the answer. "He passed this evening," she says, and a sob catches in her throat. "And now little John is hot and won't wake. I'm so afraid." Her composure crumples, and she begins to cry softly, shoulders shaking. Thomas feels a deep sympathy and a pang of terror. Agnes's husband was a carpenter, a stout and lively man, gone in a matter of days, presumably, and now their baby might be ill too. Agnes must be beside herself. She likely saw the death cart roaming and panicked, or maybe she felt she couldn't stay in that house of death alone. Perhaps she's seeking help, or simply human comfort. In normal times, Thomas would never turn away a neighbor in need. But rational fear warns him. She might carry contagion right to his doorstep. Anna is already deathly sick, and Thomas himself has been dangerously exposed. Can it get any worse? Still, inviting another into the house could compound risks. His hesitation is brief. Compassion wins out over fear. He reaches out and touches Agnes's arm lightly. "I'm so sorry," he murmurs. "Come inside quietly now. I'll see what I can do." He opens the door just enough for Agnes to slip in. She enters, clutching her baby, and Thomas closes and bars the door again. Inside, Agnes looks around, eyes blinking in the semi-darkness. She quickly spots Anna lying on the straw pallet. "Oh no. Anna too?" she whispers, her tone one of despairing understanding. Thomas nods silently, guiding her to sit on a stool near the hearth. Agnes settles, cradling her child. By the fire's glow, Thomas can see the baby's face. Little John's cheeks are red, his eyes closed. He's breathing, but shallowly, and there's a tiny bead of sweat on his brow. The sight strikes Thomas straight in the heart. Another innocent life in peril. Agnes begins to hum under her breath, rocking slightly, as if to soothe the baby, or herself. It's a tuneless, instinctual hum, the sound of a mother trying to maintain calm while the world falls apart. Thomas goes to his shelf and finds a clay cup, pours a bit of water from his bucket. He offers it to Agnes. "Drink," he says. She looks at it as if just noticing her own thirst, then sips gratefully. "Have you been able to feed him at all?" Thomas asks softly. Agnes shakes her head. "He won't nurse. He hasn't for hours. He's just so limp." Her voice cracks again. Thomas dares to feel the baby's forehead with the back of his hand. It's burning, much like Anna's. He sighs. "We'll try to cool him a little." He takes a clean rag, dampens it in the water, and hands it to her. She presses it gently to the baby's face and neck, murmuring tender words. For a moment, a fragile solidarity forms between the two adults in the room, both parents, both terrified, doing whatever they can for their ailing children. In this small candle-lit cottage, humanity endures, holding on to love and care even as the world outside succumbs to fear and isolation. Agnes sniffles and wipes her eyes. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispers. I was so frightened alone. I heard Father Augustine praying over my John's cradle, and I knew my husband was gone. I just ran. I didn't want to see them take my baby if—" She cannot finish the thought, her voice collapsing into quiet sobs. Thomas places a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone now," he says softly. "We'll face this night together." Hearing his own words, he finds he believes them. Just the presence of another adult in the room eases the crushing loneliness that had settled on him. It's dangerous, yes, but they are all in the same inferno already. Perhaps they can lend each other strength to endure it. He motions toward Anna. "She fell ill 2 days ago. I'm doing all I know to do. We can do the same for your John." Agnes nods, looking determined through her tears. The two of them work in silence for a while, applying cool compresses to the children, checking their pulses, adjusting their blankets. Agnes even produces a small vial from her apron, rose water mixed with vinegar. "I made this. It's supposed to help with fever," she explains. The subtle scent of roses fills the air as she dabs a bit on her baby's wrists and neck, and then shyly she offers some to use on Anna. Thomas nods gratefully, and they anoint Anna's temples with the fragrant liquid. The gesture has a gentle ritual quality to it, as though the simple act might ward off the darkness encroaching on their little ones. Time flows on. A distant roll of thunder signals that the storm clouds seen earlier are finally arriving. The first patters of rain begin on the roof, a soft, sporadic tapping. Thomas and Agnes sit on the earthen floor near the children, backs against the bed frame, keeping watch. They exchange whispers occasionally, fragments about their memories of happier days, their fears, their prayers. Agnes speaks of her late husband, how proud and excited he was when their son was born last year, how he'd carved a tiny rocking horse for the boy, with plans to gift it when he was older. She shares these intimate recollections in a calm, soft tone, as if telling a bedtime story, perhaps to keep herself composed. Thomas listens and nods, sometimes offering a kind word or a memory of seeing her husband around town, always friendly. Then Thomas shares a bit of his own story, how Margaret, his wife, taught Anna to sing simple hymns while doing chores, how their home used to ring with that sweet little voice. Anna loved to feed the birds in the morning, scattering crumbs by the doorstep, but now even the birds have gone quiet, maybe sensing the pall over the place, or maybe eaten by the proliferating cats and rats. Agnes smiles faintly at his anecdotes, and they both enjoy these small distractions of reminiscence. It's almost like a normal conversation, the kind neighbours might have on a peaceful evening, if not for the two fevered children and the sorrow hanging thick as smoke in the air. The rain intensifies, becoming a steadier drumming. Water leaks through a crack in the roof that Thomas meant to fix long ago. He places a pot under the drip, the plink-plink of droplets adding to the night's soundtrack. The air cools further, and a draught makes Agnes shiver. Thomas fetches another blanket, an old threadbare one, and places it around her shoulders. Lightning flickers faintly through the shutters, and a distant rumble follows. Neither of them are startled. In fact, the weather seems to mirror their turmoil, a storm raging outside, a storm of sickness within. As the early hours creep on, exhaustion tugs heavily at Thomas. He sees Agnes fighting sleep as well, her head nodding, then jerking upright. "You should rest a little," he whispers to her. "I'll watch over them." She shakes her head stubbornly at first, but clearly she's drained. After some gentle prodding, Agnes agrees to close her eyes for just a short while, on the condition that Thomas will wake her if there's any change. She moves to the opposite side of the hearth, where Thomas's cloak is lying. He indicates she can use it as a pillow. Reluctantly, she lies down on the hard floor, adjusting her baby in her arms so that he rests against her chest. Within minutes, her exhaustion overtakes her, and she falls into a light doze, her body instinctively rocking the child even in sleep. Thomas remains awake, alone with his thoughts again, but not truly alone anymore. He tends to the fire occasionally, keeping it alive but low, mindful of safety. The presence of another human being sleeping nearby somehow makes the room feel a fraction less cold, and the night less interminable. This small fellowship is like an ember of humanity glowing against the dark. For centuries, people have huddled together in hard times exactly like this, Thomas reflects, telling stories, sharing warmth, enduring. He thinks of the wider world beyond this town. Is it the same everywhere? The rumours said yes, that the plague has no mercy, afflicting every village, town, and city from Italy to England to far-off Asia. Some said entire kingdoms might collapse. It truly feels apocalyptic, like the end of days from the Holy Scriptures. Thomas recalls a passage often quoted about pestilence stalking in darkness, or the biblical plagues of Egypt. Did those ancient peoples feel as helpless as he does now? But their plagues ended eventually, either by miracle or natural course. He must believe this one will too. Nothing, not even this black death, is eternal. The thought gives him a sliver of comfort. Suddenly, Anna stirs. Thomas immediately leans in. She whimpers and her eyes flutter half open. He sees her gaze, bleary and unfocused, roam the dimly lit room. "Papa," she croaks, voice barely audible. Thomas's heart leaps. She is conscious, if only for a moment. He takes her hand gently. "I'm here, Anna. I'm here, my little love." She seems to struggle to form words. Her small hand grips his weakly. Cold," she whispers. Thomas notices she's thrown off part of her blanket while restless. He quickly tucks it back around her. "Cold? All right. Here, more blankets," he murmurs soothingly. He grabs his own heavy cloak and lays it atop her coverings to add warmth. This is a hopeful sign. Earlier she had been burning and throwing covers off. If she now feels cold, could the fever be breaking? Or is it the chill of approaching death? He pushes that latter thought away fiercely. Anna's eyes flicker toward the dark ceiling. "Mama?" she breathes, confused. Thomas's throat tightens. He smooths her hair. "Mama's not here, darling," he says softly, voice pained. "It's just Papa. Mama. Mama's with God, remember." In her fever and delirium, Anna likely doesn't recall that Margaret died. Perhaps she's seeing something, or someone, in her altered state. At the mention of God, Anna seems to smile faintly. "Angels," she mumbles, a tear leaking from her eye. Thomas bites his lip, struggling to maintain composure. He wonders if Margaret's spirit might be near, watching over them in this moment. The thought is oddly comforting. Maybe Anna senses her mother somehow. "Yes, angels are watching over you," he whispers, brushing the tear from her cheek. "Just rest." Anna's eyes drift shut again, and she slips back into a sleep or stupor, but her face looks slightly less pained than before. Thomas feels her forehead and finds it still hot. though perhaps not quite as scorching. Is it cooler? Or is he imagining it because he so desperately wants it to be true? He closes his eyes and sends a silent plea. Please, spare her. Take me if you must, but spare her. He has made this plea countless times in the past days, bargaining with heaven, though he has no assurance it will be answered. Behind him, Agnes shifts and murmurs in her sleep. The baby, little John, releases a weak cry. The first sound Thomas has heard from the child all night. It's feeble, but it's life. The sound wakes Agnes immediately. She is alert in an instant, maternal instinct on full. Shh, shh, she coos, sitting up and rocking him. The baby's cry subsides almost as quickly as it came. Agnes checks him, then looks over to Thomas. He's burning up. I'm so worried. Thomas nods in sympathy. He knows that feeling intimately. Anna woke briefly, he shares quietly. Spoke a few words. The fever might be lessening. Agnes's eyes spark with cautious hope at that. If Anna can fight through, perhaps her John can too. Thomas pours a bit more water and offers Agnes some. She uses it to wet the baby's lips and her own. The two parents exchange a weary, understanding glance. In that moment, they are bonded by the ordeal. Strangers become like family by the trials of this night. Outside, the rain continues steadily. The wind has died down, so the rain falls straight, creating a constant hush. The world beyond their door feels distant, muffled by the curtain of water. Perhaps the rain is keeping death's heralds at bay. The death cart likely won't roam until dawn now, and any wandering souls would be driven indoors. The storm has made the night even more secluded, wrapping the cottage in a cocoon of sound that isolates it from the rest of reality. In this rain-soaked darkness, time almost stands still, marked only by the crackle of the fire and the drip from the leaky roof. Agnes gently hums a lullaby to her baby, a melody familiar to Thomas as one his wife used to sing to Anna. It is the old song of the travelling moon, a soothing tune that speaks of a guardian moon watching over sleepers. Agnes's voice is quiet, strained, but she hits the notes softly. Thomas finds himself humming along on a verse, remembering the words, "Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee all through the night." It's ironic to sing of peace in a time of torment, but the act of singing calms their breathing, and perhaps eases the children as well. He imagines for a moment that beyond the clouds the moon is indeed watching, shedding gentle light on a world that desperately needs gentle things. They sing together in whispers, repeating verses and letting the harmonies linger. Repetition of the gentle melody lulls even Thomas's frayed nerves. When they finish, Agnes leans her head back against the wall, eyes closed, still humming lightly. Thomas pokes the fire one more time and notices through the window's crack that the darkness outside is not quite as absolute as before. Could dawn be approaching? He realizes, with a mixture of astonishment and relief, that yes, the inky black is giving way to a very subtle greyness in the east. They have made it through the deepest part of the night. The thought injects a surge of energy in him. If only they can make it to sunrise, perhaps things will be better, or at least they will have survived one more night. The rain outside abates to a drizzle, as if sensing the coming dawn too. Thomas stands and quietly opens the window shutter just a couple of inches to peer out. The sky is overcast, no sign of the sun yet, but the quality of darkness is changing. The outline of rooftops is just perceptible against the horizon. A rooster crows somewhere, a weak, strained crow, but a signal of morning nonetheless. Thomas never thought he would take comfort in a rooster's crow, yet here he is, sighing with relief at the sound. He closes the shutter again to keep the damp out and turns back to check on Anna and John. Both children remain very ill, but by God's grace, both are still breathing into the dawn. Thomas notices that Anna's breathing is a little less ragged. She's still very hot and sick, no doubt, but there is a slight improvement from the worst point in the night. Agnes's baby, John, still has a fever as well, but the fact he cried out and is nursing a bit now, Agnes managed to get him to suckle for a minute, are promising signs. Could it be that the worst of the fevers crested in the night, or is it just a lull? Thomas banishes the pessimistic thought. He chooses to see the dawn as a hopeful omen. Agnes stands and moves to the window, opening the shutter a crack as Thomas did. She inhales deeply, letting in a bit of the cool dawn air, and she murmurs a quick prayer as she gazes out. Thank you, Lord, for seeing us to morning. The light filtering in touches her face, making her look both young and terribly tired. Shadows under her eyes, but a small smile on her lips. Thomas gently tends to Anna, wiping her brow once more. The rose vinegar scent still lingers on her skin from earlier. He notes that the angry red flush has faded to a paler pink. She might remain in dangerous condition for days, but he will hold on to any positive sign with gratitude. He whispers to her, "We're almost to morning, dear one. Hold on. The night is passing." Agnes comes back and quietly says, "The rain has stopped. It's so quiet out there, like the world is new." Thomas nods. Dawn in plague times is a strange thing. The new day could bring improvement, or just more death. But at the very least, daylight dispels some of the terror that flourishes in the dark. They both know that with morning, tasks await, possibly fetching a proper doctor, if any can be found, trying to get food or more remedies, and facing the possible loss if things turn worse. But those worries are for the coming hours. Right now, they share a fragile optimism simply from having survived the night. They sit together by the hearth as the grey light grows stronger outside. The fire has died down to a gentle glow, and Thomas doesn't stoke it further. The dimness of the room fades gradually as natural light seeps in through the gaps in the shutters and thatch. It reveals the humble interior more clearly. The rough wooden table, a few stools, the basket of herbs, a spinning wheel in the corner that hasn't been touched since Margaret fell ill, some scattered toys of Anna's on a shelf, a rag doll, a carved wooden sheep Thomas made for her. These homely sights give Thomas an ache of nostalgia, but also a surprising sense of resilience. These everyday objects, survivors of normal life, seem to quietly promise that normalcy might return someday. Agnes carefully unwraps her baby a bit to examine him in the better light. She gently presses her fingers to the little one's neck and under his arms, checking for the dreaded swellings. Thomas watches tensely. After a moment, Agnes closes her eyes in relief. "I don't feel any lumps. Maybe he just has the fever, not the full pestilence," she whispers. It could be too early to tell, or maybe just maybe, the child will be spared that horror. Thomas doesn't want to jinx it, but he reaches over and squeezes Agnes's hand with a small smile. "That's good. That's very good." He then steels himself and checks Anna in turn. Gently, he touches the spot under her jawline where a bubo had formed. It's still there, but does it feel slightly smaller? It might be wishful thinking. The one he lanced under her arm is still swollen but a little softer. She doesn't flinch or wake when he touches it, which might mean nothing as she's so weak. Still, at least it hasn't grown larger. The quiet is suddenly broken by a sound that, for once, isn't ominous. A bird's chirp. Clear and sweet, it trills from outside the window. Agnes and Thomas both pause and share a look of mild astonishment. A small sparrow, perhaps, singing at dawn, oblivious to human sorrows. That simple, innocent sound causes Agnes to actually let out a tiny laugh, quickly muffled by her hand. It's the first laugh, or approximation of one, that Thomas has heard in what feels like ages. He smiles broadly, feeling something loosening in his chest, some knot of despair unwinding just a little. "The sparrows are still singing," Agnes says softly, almost in wonder. "They don't know. They sing anyway." Thomas nods. Life goes on around us, even now. It's a humbling realization that amidst all the death, somewhere nature still follows its course. The sun still rises, birds still sing, the earth still turns. Perhaps, Thomas thinks, that is a message from God or nature not to lose all hope. They both sit quietly for a while, simply listening to that bird and watching the grey dawn light grow stronger. The sky lightens from charcoal to pewter to a pale silver, peeking through cracks and seams. Anna stirs again, not fully waking, but as she moves, she clutches the blanket closer, an unconscious gesture that suggests the fever's intensity might have broken enough for her to feel the chill of morning. Thomas carefully adds another blanket around her and feels a cautious joy at this sign. Agnes's baby yawns feebly, his tiny fists curling, and for the first time that night, the mother manages a genuine smile down at her child. Not long after, the church bell rings, but this time it's not the death knell, it's the matins bell, weakly rung, but rung nonetheless. Father Augustine must be alive and carrying on, calling the faithful to prayer as he always did at sunrise. The bell's tone is hollow and echoes over the damp town. To Thomas and Agnes, it is the sound of survival, a sign that not everyone and everything is lost. They bow their heads instinctively, joining whatever remnant of townfolk might be responding in prayer at that moment. Thomas prays silently. Thank you for this dawn. Thank you for seeing us through. Continue to guide us this day, and please, if it be your will, heal these children. Agnes adds her own trembling Amen. They carefully step to the door and open it just a crack to let in the fresh morning air. A cool breeze enters, carrying the scent of wet earth and washed-clean stone. The street outside glistens with rainwater, puddles reflecting the pale morning sky. The town is quiet, but within that quiet there is at least light now. They can see a few figures down the lane, perhaps someone stepping out to check on a neighbour, or to fetch water, just as Thomas did in the night. Life, tentative and cautious, is re-emerging with the day. Thomas regards the scene with a sombre face. There is much sorrow yet in store. He knows many will have awoken to find loved ones passed in the night. The death cart will do its rounds in daylight too, to gather what it missed. Fresh graves will be dug under the weak sun. This plague is not over, not by far, but they have survived this one terrible night, which means there is a chance. If they can survive one night, they can survive another, and another, until eventually the pestilence burns itself out, or help comes, or a cure is found. He turns to Agnes, seeing the dawn light soft on her face as she gazes at her baby. Her eyes are closed, and lips moving in silent thanksgiving. When she opens her eyes, they meet Thomas's. No words are needed. The mutual gratitude and tentative hope are evident. "Will you be all right today?" Thomas asks her gently. "You can stay here as long as you need." Agnes looks around the small cottage and nods. "If it's truly no trouble, I don't want to return home just yet." Going back to the house where her husband's body likely still lies is understandably too much to bear right now. "Of course, stay," Thomas assures. "We'll tend to the children together." He knows they will face many tasks once the town stirs. Perhaps they should inform someone to help retrieve Agnes's husband's body, or see if the priest can come to say a prayer from a distance. Food must be found. Maybe there are healers or apothecaries who have new potions to try. They will need more water, more fuel, clean cloths. The daylight brings both hope and burdens, but for a short while longer, Thomas chooses to simply savour the victory of having gotten through the worst hours. He steps outside into his little yard for a moment. The ground is muddy from the rain. The air smells of petrichor, the fresh scent after rain, instead of death for once. The clouds overhead are beginning to break apart, revealing a streak of pure morning gold on the horizon. The sun is about to show itself. He closes his eyes and tilts his face upward as a few warm rays break through, touching his skin. Dawn's light feels like a benediction. He hears the creak of the door as Agnes joins him outside, carrying baby John snugly. They stand together, looking at the rising sun. It's a subdued sunrise given the clouds, but when the sun's disk emerges fully, it bathes the wet town in a gentle glow. They both instinctively breathe in deeply, as if inhaling the light and hope of day. In the distance, they notice a couple of townsfolk stepping out into the road, looking around. One man down the way waves hesitantly at Thomas. It's the blacksmith, alive yet, it seems. Thomas raises a hand in return. These small acknowledgements among survivors mean a lot, a silent exchange saying we're still here. Behind them, from inside the cottage, there's a soft sound. It's Anna's voice, weak but calling. Papa. Thomas spins on his heel and rushes back inside, Agnes right behind. Anna has awakened to the daylight. She's trying to sit up, confusion on her face. Thomas is at her side in an instant, easing her up gently and hugging her frail form. I'm here, Anna, I'm here. She blinks, recognizing him, and then her gaze moves to Agnes and the baby, now in the doorway. Agnes smiles kindly and steps forward to kneel near the pallet. Anna's little brow furrows as she tries to recall. I feel strange, she murmurs. Her voice is hoarse but coherent. Thomas cannot hold back a relieved smile. You're ill, dear one, but you're awake now. You made it to morning. He kisses her temple softly, careful of her sores. Anna manages the ghost of a smile in return, though she's clearly very weak. Her eyes then drift to where her mother's absence looms. Mama, she asks uncertainly, as if expecting her to walk through the door with breakfast. Thomas's heart twists. Mama is gone to heaven, he says quietly, stroking her hand. Anna's eyes well with tears as memory returns. A single tear escapes down her cheek, but she nods with sad understanding. Agnes, wanting to comfort, shows Anna the baby. Do you remember baby John from down the lane? Anna nods again, a tiny movement. The baby chooses that moment to make a small cooing sound. He's awake and looking about with bleary curiosity. It's as if even he senses the tension easing. Thomas takes a cup of water and helps Anna drink a few sips. She coughs, but swallows them, which is good. You must rest, Anna, but you'll be all right, he whispers, voice thick with emotion he tries to restrain. She just closes her eyes and leans against him, trusting. Thomas gently lays her back down after, and she seems to drift into a more natural sleep, not the insensible fevered unconsciousness of before, but a true rest. Outside, the sparrow's chirping has been joined by other birds, life awakening with the dawn chorus as the rain clouds continue to part. The world sounds almost normal for a brief spell. Agnes and Thomas exchange a final look, both of them silently acknowledging what they have endured and what's left to face. They have seen the very worst that night had to offer, the kind of horrors and fears that will be written about in chronicles and remembered for generations. Yet, in the darkest hours, they found courage in compassion and companionship. Their story, of two parents protecting their children through a night of plague, may never be known beyond these walls, but it is one of countless such quiet tales of fortitude that together form the tapestry of survival in this catastrophe. Thomas feels a well of gratitude for Agnes's timely arrival, which oddly gave him strength, for the fact that he could help her, which gave him purpose, and above all, that both children are alive at sunrise. He knows not what the days ahead hold. The plague is merciless and unpredictable. But he has hope now kindled anew. He witnessed that even in a medieval hell, kindness and love persisted. He stands at the threshold of his cottage and looks out one more time at the morning sky. The sun breaks free of the last cloud, shining resolutely down upon the stricken town. It illuminates the droplets on every leaf and roof tile, making them sparkle. The sight is strangely beautiful, a reminder that each morning is fresh, unsullied, a gift. Behind him, Agnes softly sings a prayer of thanks, her voice barely above a whisper as she rocks her child. Thomas whispers his own thanks into the golden air. The night is over. They have survived. And as the new day begins, Thomas steps back inside to continue the fight, fortified by the knowledge that even the longest, darkest night gives way to dawn. In this knowledge lies the strength that will carry them, one day, one night at a time, toward better times. Thus ends this night in the medieval hell, not with triumphant victory, but with the gentle resilience of ordinary souls who refuse to surrender to the darkness. In the quiet light of dawn, hope lives on,